Timothy Leary was born on October 22, 1920 in Springfield, Massachusetts. He went to Holy Cross College, which is a U.S. military academy at West Point, and later graduated from the University of Alabama in 1943. Leary then received his doctorate and later taught at the University of California at Berkeley. While teaching at Berkeley, he developed an egalitarian model for interaction between the psychotherapist and the patient, promoted new group therapy techniques, and published a system for classifying interpersonal behavior. His research in clinical psychology led to his hiring as a lecturer for Harvard University in 1959. This is when Leary began his experimentation with psychedelic drugs such as psilocybin and lysergic acid, or LSD. He believed that these drugs could effectively transform personality and expand human consciousness, and in 1963, Leary and his fellow researcher, Richard Alpert, were fired from Harvard for the experimentation with hallucinogens on graduate students, artists, writers, and musicians. Following his release, Leary established a foundation in Millbrook, New York, for the study of psychedelic substances. He called the establishment the Castelli Institute, and he began to use LSD in a lightly regulated manner. This was way opposite to the normal experiments which were usually carried out by scientists that believed in set and setting. This was used in order to safeguard against bad reactions to the drugs, which were called bad trips.
Leary became widely known by all different types of people for his support of the effects of such drugs. He played a role in the counterculture of anti-Vietnam movement as he urged young people to try the drugs with his famous catchphrase, "Turn on, tune in, drop out." Conservatives, including President Nixon, were very much against this idea that Leary was promoting. Nixon even labeled him as the most dangerous man in America. Other researchers were very upset and said that Leary was a detriment to the serious study of psychedelic drugs.
His scientific critics believed that the use of LSD led to damage and possibly breaks in human chromosomes, and they used this belief to try to sway people into disregarding his opinions. Of course, the whole idea behind the counterculture movement was that adults were corrupt and wrong, so young adults did not consider this theory to be true. Dr. Herman Lisko conducted an experiment on Leary's chromosomes, which he thought would prove this theory to be true, but he found that Leary's chromosomes were unaffected by his constant use of LSD. Despite this failure, critics still believed that even though the LSD had not affected his chromosomes, it had definitely ruined his mind. This was never substantiated by anything other than a comment that said that his eyes looked completely empty while he spoke to the public, but his activity later in life shows that he was still very active mentally.
1965, LSD was made a legal substance, and in 1970, Leary was arrested and charged with drug possession but managed to make a dramatic escape, only to be recaptured in Afghanistan in 1973. He eventually paroled in 1976 and would remain out of the spotlight until becoming a popular figure in internet communication, which he considered a boundary-demolishing force. Leary apparently had planned to broadcast his suicide over the internet before deciding against it. He would later die of cancer on May 31st, 1996. Despite his actions later in life, people still remember him today for his influential role of the U.S. counterculture movement that occurred in the 1960s.